Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 7 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll take up is related to money laundering, as the assets attached by the Enforcement Directorate in the cases related to money laundering have risen in the past decade. Also, the Additional Solicitor General has observed that if the courts acquit or discharge the accused in the predicate offence, then the ED should not stop the investigation in the case related to money laundering. The second article is related to India-Bangladesh relations, as India remains committed to normalize the ties with Bangladesh and the two countries are moving towards the full resumption of the visa services. Additionally, we'll take up 5 articles in the prelims pointer section which will be helpful for your prelims preparation. The first article is related to money laundering. The context behind it is that the assets attached by the Enforcement Directorate in the money laundering cases have risen multifold over the past 2 decades. Also, the Additional Solicitor General has observed that in the cases in which the courts acquit or discharge the accused in the predicate offence, then the Enforcement Directorate should not stop the investigation in the money laundering case. Therefore, we'll discuss the process of money laundering in India, the methods of money laundering, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act in India, the concerns related to PMLA, the steps to counter the money laundering, the challenges in the prevention of money laundering, as well as a few suggestions in this regard. This is important in GS3 under the topic money laundering and its prevention. First, let us start with the basics. What does money laundering mean? As per the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, money laundering is the processing of the money which is gotten from criminal activities to disguise its illicit origin. To conceal its illegal origin, the processing of that money is the process of money laundering. As per the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, it is impacting about 2.5 to 3% of the world's GDP. Therefore, it is causing a loss of taxation, it is causing the loss to the national exchequers, and it is even giving the economic power in the wrong hands, creating a parallel economy. Now, what is the process of money laundering? It involves 3 stages chiefly: placement, layering, and integration. The placement stage involves the injection. It involves the injection of the dirty money into the system. And the layering stage involves the camouflaging. It involves the concealment of that dirty money by creating a series of transactions to make it appear as if it is white money and it has been sourced from legitimate means. And then integration is the final step of withdrawal in the form of various investments, etc. You can also present it in the form of a diagram in your answer. For example, first the dirty money is integrated into the financial system and then it is layered, for example, by creating a series of transactions. First, for example, it is transferred into the bank account of a company X. That company X gives loan to another company Y, and then that company Y is further giving a payment back to the company X, which is creating false invoices by providing supposedly some goods or services which do not even exist, therefore creating a series of transactions and hiding the identity, the origin, the illicit origin of the money. And then finally it is integrated and withdrawn, for example, for the purpose of purchase of luxurious assets, financial investments, commercial investments, industrial investments, etc. Now, why is money laundering done? Chiefly it is to hide the profits. For example, if the profits are in cash and we want to hide the cash because we want to avoid paying tax on it, therefore we launder that money. Huge amounts of margins are there in some businesses which are functioning on the basis of cash transactions and they are not reported, therefore that money is laundered, and it is even used in organized crime also. For example, for drug running, trafficking, extortion, that money so received from the illicit activities, criminal activities, that is laundered. Similarly, even white collar crimes also. For example, the crimes involving stock manipulation, round tripping. For example, you have heard about Nirav Modi, Vijay Mallya or Satyam scandal, etc. involving the white collar crimes and the money so generated being laundered. Now, what are the methods of money laundering specifically? It may involve hawala transactions. Now what is Hawala? Hawala is the creation of a parallel remittance system. It is the creation of a kind of a parallel remittance system. For example, it is functioning like an alternative to the traditional banking systems to avoid paying taxes or to avoid detection of the money trail. For example, you want to send the money from India to USA. You find a Hawala operator in India, you pay cash to the Hawala operator here, he can share a code with you, you send that code to the person whom you want to send the money in USA, that person will again approach the Hawala operator in USA, tell that person the code, and the Hawala operator in USA will give the person who is supposed to receive the final money in the form of cash, US dollars, to that person, and therefore it creates like a parallel remittance system to hide that trail of money, and therefore ensuring that there are cross-border cash transactions also. Similarly, there are electronic money laundering methods. For example, various gambling websites, online auctions, gaming websites, cryptocurrency, one of the chief methods of money laundering. Smurfing is another method. Smurfing involves the dividing of a large amount of money into small amounts and then laundering that, so that it is avoiding detection, because large transactions, they are easily termed to be suspicious. And similarly, there is direct smuggling of cash also, for example across the US-Mexico border. And there are frontal organizations also established to launder money, for example setting up of shops who are creating inflated invoices for the goods or services that they are selling, and even creating false invoices also to show the profits, to ensure that the money which is in the form of cash, which is gotten from the illicit activities, that can be shown as money gained from business activities. Similarly, round tripping, which involves the profit shifting the profit to tax havens, and even creation of the offshore accounts in some countries which have the bank secrecy laws, for example Hong Kong, Panama, Bahrain, Bahamas, etc. And even the establishment of the shell companies. The shell companies provide the so-called goods and services just to create false invoices where the money can be sent, so that payment can be sent and it can be shown to be in lieu of some goods or services received. Now coming to the Prevention of Money Laundering Act in India, before discussing the salient provisions, let us observe the background of PMLA as well. The Parliament can enact any law even if it involves a subject from the state list as well, if it is for the fulfillment of India's obligations under any international treaty or international conventions, for example under the Article 253. And there are a series of UN conventions and declarations regarding money laundering even prior to the PMLA, as a precursor to the PMLA. For example, the United Nations Convention Against Illicit Traffic in the Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances, which urges the member nations to ensure that there is no drug trafficking and the money laundering of the money gotten from drug trafficking especially. And there is the establishment of the Financial Action Task Force, that is setting the global standards regarding anti-money laundering and also anti-terror financing. The United Nations General Assembly's Political Declaration Global Program of Action urges the member nations to come up with laws and regulations to prevent money laundering. The Palermo Convention, the United Nations Convention Against the Transnational Organized Crime of 2000, even encourages the nations to establish rules and regulations and laws as well to prevent money laundering related to especially the organized crime proceeds. Now coming to the salient provisions of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Firstly, it defines the scheduled offences. If there is a scheduled offence which is committed, which is in the schedule of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, whether in Part A or Part B, then the proceeds from that offence, if it is laundered, will be treated as the offence of money laundering. The scheduled offences defined under the section 2Y of the PMLA Act, that it means the offences specified under Part A of the schedule. It involves the offences, for example, the offences of the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act. It involves the waging of the war against the nation. Now even the Prevention of Corruption Act related offences have been included in the Part A of the schedule. And if there are offences specified under Part B of the schedule, then they will also be treated as the scheduled offences if the total value involved is above a certain limit. It also defines the offence of money laundering under section 3, that whosoever directly or indirectly attempts to indulge or assists or knowingly is a party or actually involved in any process or activity which is connected with the proceeds of crime and projecting it as untainted property shall be guilty of the offense of the money laundering. It even provides for the punishment for money laundering, providing for the imprisonment of 3 years, extending up to 7 years also, and now it can extend up to 10 years as well. And it also provides for the attachment of the property, that the enforcement directorate can go for the attachment of the property if it is involved in money laundering, where who can attach the property? The director, or it can be any other officer not below the rank of the deputy director who has been authorized by the director and who has the reason to believe, and such reason to believe has to be recorded in the writing on the basis of some material in his possession, that any person is in possession of any proceeds of the crime and that possession has been derived from the committing of a scheduled offense, and there is likelihood of the concealment of such possession or the transfer of such property, then the ED can provisionally attach any such property for a period not extending more than 90 days. Additionally, even the banking institutions, the financial institutions, they also have the responsibility to prevent money laundering. How is their role under the PMLA? They have to maintain a record of all the transactions, the nature and value of which may be prescribed as per the rules, and additionally they have to furnish the information regarding such transactions to the ED whenever it is required. Therefore, they have to maintain the records of the identities of all their clients so that the transactions they can be recorded and additionally they can be traced back whenever there is an investigation by the Enforcement Directorate. The PMLA has also undergone several amendments. For example, in 2009, it was amended to include the criminal conspiracy to the schedule of the PMLA. The criminal conspiracy provided under the section 120B of the Indian Penal Code was added to the schedule of the PMLA. Therefore, now if there is a criminal conspiracy to commit any offense or where an offense has been committed but that offense itself is not there in the schedule of the PMLA, still the Enforcement Directorate can investigate that case because it is based upon the criminal conspiracy which is there in the schedule of the PMLA, therefore widening the jurisdiction of the Enforcement Directorate to investigate regarding any offense if there is criminal conspiracy. Additionally, its jurisdiction was also extended to include international jurisdiction. The Enforcement Directorate can have international jurisdiction and investigate the cases where the money has been laundered abroad to trace the proceeds of the crime. Similarly, in 2012, it was again amended to include the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988 to Part A of the schedule. Earlier it was in the Part B. The Part A usually involves the grave offences, for example, immoral traffic prevention, waging of the war against the nation, etc. In 2023, there was an amendment to the rules of the PMLA as well, thereby updating the definition of the beneficial ownership. Any individual or group, if he is holding more than 10% ownership in the client of the reporting entity, then he will be termed as a beneficial owner. Earlier, this requirement was more than 25% ownership. The reporting entity here means any banks, financial institutions, even the real estate firms, jewelry sector firms, etc. And the 2023 amendment expanded the due diligence requirement. That is, the disclosure of the beneficial owners have to be there beyond the current requirement of the KYC norms, the Know Your Customer norms, so that there is additional requirement of the furnishing of the registration certificates, PAN cards, etc. And there was also simultaneously widening the definition of the non-profit to include even the religious and charitable purposes organizations in the Section 2 of the Income Tax Act 1961 and even the trusts or societies registered under the Societies Registration Act. But there are certain concerns regarding the Prevention of Money Laundering Act in India. One of the primary concerns is that certain minor offences, less serious offences, they have also been included in the offences under the schedule of the PMLA. For example, the offences related to trademark infringement, copyright infringement, even they are included. Similarly, at times there is the treatment of the ordinary crimes at par with the serious crimes. For example, the severity of the punishment can vary, but there is a treating at the same level of the Prevention of Corruption Act accused and the drug trafficking accused under the Part A of the schedule of the PMLA. Similarly, the proceeds of the crime, the definition of it is broad. Therefore, it is giving discretion to the authorities to decide what is the proceed of the crime. Also, there are stringent bail conditions if there is Prevention of Money Laundering Act imposed. For example, a judge usually gives bail in case the innocence of the accused is proved. Otherwise, usually bail is denied. This goes against the Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence, the Indian philosophy of criminal jurisprudence also, that we presume the accused innocent until he is proven guilty. Also here the burden of proof, it lies upon the accused rather than the prosecution to prove that there has been the commission of a crime. And it goes even against federalism also. For example, the ED can investigate cases even without the consent of the state in case there is allegation of money laundering, but the other agencies, for example even the CBI, that can only take up an investigation in case it has gotten the state consent for the investigation or it has got the orders from the Supreme Court or the High Court. Also, it may violate even the fundamental rights of the accused. For example, under Article 21. Like the Enforcement Directorate is not required to disclose the details of the enforcement case information report. The details of the enforcement case information report includes the details of the allegations which are leveled against the accused. Even they are not required to be disclosed by the ED. Now, what have been the observations of the judiciary in this regard? In the P. Chidambaram versus Directorate of Enforcement case, the court held that the scheduled offence commission, the committing of a scheduled offence, is a sine qua non for an offence to be made out under the money laundering. Now, what does that mean? It means that if there is the commission of a predicate offence, which is the scheduled offence, then only the proceeds of the crime will be generated, then only the money can be laundered. Therefore, if the commission of the predicate offence itself is not there, then there cannot be the generation of illicit money. Therefore, there cannot be money laundering. Hence, it is a sine qua non for the money laundering to happen. And if the accused is acquitted from the predicate offence charge, then he will naturally be acquitted from the money laundering charge. Also, in the Vijay Madan Lal Chaudhary and others versus Union of India case, the court again held that money laundering is an independent offence, but it is still dependent upon the underlying predicate offence to the extent of the proceeds of the crime which are generated because of the commission of the illicit activity. And if the predicate offence fails, therefore the prosecution under the act cannot be continued by the Enforcement Directorate. Whereas now the Additional Solicitor General has given a contrary opinion, saying that the ED should not stop the investigation in the money laundering case even if the court has acquitted the accused from the predicate offence charge. Now, what are the steps to counter the money laundering? One, we have the statutory measure, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act that we just discussed. Additionally, we have the institutional measures. For example, the Financial Intelligence Unit, the FIU, that functions to discover the transactions, the suspicious transactions where money laundering may be happening, and the Enforcement Directorate for the investigation under the PMLA. Additionally, there is the use of artificial intelligence to decode the layers of transactions which are created to ensure that we are able to trace the trail of the money. And there are international measures also. For example, the establishment of the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, that is to ensure there are global standards for the anti-money laundering and terror financing. There are the double taxation avoidance agreements that ensures that there is cross-border financial information exchange that again leads to finding of the trail of the money. Also, there is Vienna Convention, that is UN Drug Convention, again to encourage the nations to prevent the money laundering of the drug-related proceeds. There is the Egmont Group. The Egmont Group is the group of the financial intelligence units of various countries, and thereby the exchange of information related to the financial transactions happens to trace the money laundering proceeds. There is the Asia Pacific Group also, which has given the 40+9 recommendations regarding the money laundering tackling. But still there are various challenges in the prevention of the money laundering. For example, the technology evolves at a fast pace, and the money laundering happens with the newest technology, and the enforcement agencies, they are not able to keep up pace with the upcoming technology or the pace of evolution of the technology. Additionally, the money laundering is based upon the predicate offense. Therefore, if the predicate offense charge fails, then the money laundering charge also fails. Also, there is smuggling which happens. There are black market channels which are created to ensure that there are cash transactions which are happening and which go undetected. They are not there in any transaction records of any financial institution. And the KYC implementation, the know your customer implementation norms, implementation has been laggard on part of certain financial institutions. There are various tax havens also which facilitate the creation of anonymous accounts with strict financial secrecy laws, and therefore there is the sending of that money abroad. The conviction rate additionally on part of the prosecution from the enforcement directorate has also been low. There is the cross-border camouflaging of the transactions which becomes difficult to detect again. Now, what are the suggestions that we can give regarding the prevention of money laundering? First, we need to ensure that there is proper due diligence process for the verification of the clients to ensure that there are no transactions for which the owners cannot be traced. And we can also establish a special cell like the Economic Intelligence Council. For the money laundering utilizing crypto specifically, we can go for the monitoring of the transactions. Even the state supervision can be made mandatory for the third party ID providers which provide the ID, the passwords, etc. for the crypto transactions. And we can utilize the blockchain methods also to monitor the transactions. Additionally, there can be further international cooperation for the finalizing of penal framework regarding the money laundering, and the recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force can also be implemented, which recommends the targeted financial sections regimes across the countries, and also the reviewing of the adequacy of the laws and regulations to ensure that they are not outdated by the countries, and the maintenance of the financial records by the financial institutions for at least 5 years to ensure that the history can be traced back. Now, coming to the article, the ED has sent more than 350 mutual legal assistance requests to the foreign jurisdictions to ensure that it is able to trace the money trail and to seek evidence and to pursue the extradition related assistance in the cases involving the fugitive economic offenders. And most of the requests are going to the destinations including the UAE, Singapore, UK, etc. And these formal requests finally facilitate the international cooperation, including the gathering of evidence which is admissible in the judicial proceedings, the tracing of the money trails, examining the suspects, etc. While simultaneously, the Additional Solicitor General has observed that even if the courts acquit or discharge the accused in the predicate offence, the ED should not stop the investigation of the money laundering cases. And even the Minister of State for Finance has suggested that the long-standing principle of prioritizing liberty of the accused may no longer hold primacy in the current legal framework if it is related to money laundering. There is a mains practice question also. Money laundering poses a serious threat to economic stability, governance and national security by facilitating terror financing and organized crime. Explain the process of money laundering. What steps has the government of India taken to combat this menace? Please try to write it. The next article is related to India-Bangladesh relations, as India remains committed towards the normalization of the ties with Bangladesh, and the two countries are moving towards the full-scale resumption of the visa services. Therefore, we'll discuss the significance of Bangladesh for India, the challenges in the bilateral relations, and a few suggestions to improve the ties between the two countries. This is important in GS2 under the topic India and its neighborhood relations. First, let us observe the significance of Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a strategically located country. We share a long boundary with Bangladesh. From a geostrategic point of view, we need cooperation from Bangladesh to ensure regional stability, and we both are members of several regional blocs. For example, the BIMSTEC, Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand Economic Cooperation, the BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, and also the IORA, the Indian Ocean Rim Association. And from a geopolitical aspect as well, we need cooperation from Bangladesh to ensure cooperation in the counter-terrorism activities and to ensure border security also, because we have a large riverine border with Bangladesh as well. Additionally, we need Bangladesh for getting a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council as well, because Bangladesh can give us one more vote. From the geo-economic point of view as well, Bangladesh is significant because we import textile from there. Textile from Bangladesh is cheap, as the labor and the production there is cheap, and we export farmer products to Bangladesh. Also, we export the energy to Bangladesh. For example, we sent them diesel when it was facing a crunch because of the supply chain disruption from the West Asia. Additionally, it is lying on our trade route to Southeast Asia, and it is the fifth largest export destination, and it is our biggest trade partner in South Asia. From a connectivity point of view as well, we need cooperation from Bangladesh. For example, ensuring connectivity with the northeast region of India, like the Agartala-Akhora rail link. And there is a protocol on inland water trade and transit between India and Bangladesh that allows the movement of the goods vessels on the Bangladeshi rivers for ensuring riverine transport and the securing of the sea lanes of communication, as well as the India-Bangladesh protocol route, which allows for the transit of the inland vessels on specific routes since 1972 on the Bangladeshi rivers as well. There are several defense exercises as well showing the defense cooperation between the two countries. For example, Sampriti, the army exercise, Bongo Sagar, the navy exercise. And we have deep cultural ties as well with the Bangladesh. For example, the people-to-people ties, celebration of common festivals like Durga festival. But there are certain concerns in the bilateral relations. One of the primary concerns is related to the border vulnerabilities. This is exploited by the radical Islamic outfits in the border region in Bangladesh and the criminal networks as they attempt infiltration, and also the Salafist activities promoting even further extremism. And the Bangladeshis preachers, they conduct religious discourses in the West Bengal border districts. For example, the districts of Malda, Murshidabad, Note 24 Parganas, which are especially affected. And also there are ethnic and linguistic similarities in the border regions, and this aids infiltration of the radical elements. And even there is illegal migration also, which happens into India, especially into the states of Assam, West Bengal and Tripura, therefore affecting their demography. And also there is the spreading of extremist Bengali literature on the social media through the propaganda related activities. And even there is the functioning of various terror modules, for example JMB and ABT, the Ansarullah Bangla team, although some of them have been neutralized, but they keep on coming up again and again. And there are various camps also which are held, for example by ULFA, NDF, etc. in the region. Then there is the concern related to the Rohingya refugees. There are more than 1 million Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, and they are vulnerable to radicalization. Also, there is the functioning of the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. The Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army recruits these vulnerable Rohingyas for anti-India activities. Additionally, they go for the infiltration attempts, therefore changing the demography in the border regions of India. And another issue is related to the Chittagong Hill Tracts. There are ethnic conflicts, and therefore the demographic changes also because of the illegal infiltration and illegal immigration. This becomes a potential base for the insurgent groups to operate, insurgent groups which are operating against the national interests of India. Additionally, there are attacks on the minorities, religious minorities in Bangladesh, although it is not acknowledged by the current regime in Bangladesh. And there are increasing Pakistani footprints also in Bangladesh now, which is a major cause of concern for India. For example, there are strengthened ties between Bangladesh and Pakistan, and there are military and ISI delegations from Pakistan visiting in the sensitive border areas in Bangladesh. And there is even the resumption of the direct trade between Pakistan and Bangladesh after 1971, and ISI is directly aiding the Jamaat-e-Mujahideen and also the Lashkar-e-Taiba, etc. Therefore, Pakistan is promoting the Islamic identity in Bangladesh, making it more extremist. Additionally, there is the China angle, as Bangladesh has in the past invited China, and if China starts reviving the Lal Monir Haat air base, then it will be a matter of major security concern for India, because if China starts deploying fighter jets there, it directly affects India's security, because India's northeast is connected to the mainland through a narrow Chicken Neck corridor. Therefore, the security in the Siliguri corridor will be affected. Plus, there has been a misreading of the maritime geography. As the two countries, if they cooperate together, India can function as the guardian of the ocean. We will not be acting against the interests of Bangladesh. Rather, there can be mutual cooperation, as there is the sharing of the sea lanes of communication nearby as well. Additionally, there are the traditional disputes, for example, the sharing of the transboundary river waters, for example, the Ganga water, and also the smuggling and trafficking related activities in the border regions. Now, what are the suggestions that we can give for the improvement in the bilateral ties? We can go for the suggestions given by the Parliamentary Standing Committee in this regard. Regarding the strategic engagement, we can suggest that India needs to ensure diplomatic engagement with all the stakeholders and ensure that there is the complementing of the diplomatic engagement with the track 2 diplomacy and track 1.5 diplomacy. By going for the engagement via media, via the business ties, also the people to people ties, and we can even leverage our soft power as well. And regarding the stay of Sheikh Hasina in India, we can adopt a principled approach, a humanitarian approach, which will also be in line with India's ethics as well as India's international obligations, and also a principled stand. Regarding the strategic engagement, the PSC even suggested that we can preserve our 1971 legacy. For that, we need to maintain our goodwill. We need to counter the emergence of the revisionist narratives which are coming up in Bangladesh, to ensure that the propaganda is countered. The PSC recommended also to monitor the Chinese influence, especially in the Mongla Port, Lalmonirhat Air Base and the Pekwa submarine base. Simultaneously, we can also leverage the BIMSTEC for furthering the cooperation with Bangladesh, ensuring that we give full diplomatic and technical support when Bangladesh is the chairman of the BIMSTEC, and we can implement the BIMSTEC master plan for ensuring transport connectivity. Regarding the economic ties, the PSC recommended that we need to improve our trade relations by ensuring better infrastructure at the border, by building more integrated checkposts, ensuring connectivity, and even ensuring the digital trade facilitation. And we need to prevent the dumping of the Chinese goods into India, which may be done via the RCEP, of which India is not a part, which we can do by ensuring the rules of origin verification mechanisms. Additionally, we can conclude the comprehensive economic partnership agreement with Bangladesh in an expedited manner, and for the development partnership, we can invest further in the ongoing Dhaka-Tongi-Joydapur railway line as well. Regarding the security related suggestions, the PSC recommended that for the border we can go for fencing, complete the fencing, the coordination between the border security force and the border guards Bangladesh to ensure that there are regular director general level talks, modern surveillance mechanisms, for example the motion sensors, infrared sensors, etc., and multi-agency coordination between the state police, the central law enforcement agencies and the investigation agencies, as well as the intelligence agencies. To counter the illegal immigration, it suggested the creation of a dedicated bilateral mechanism or the establishment of a joint working group. Other suggestions that we can give is related to the renewal of the Ganga Water Treaty. The renewal can be done by using the updated hydrological data, climate change projections, and to ensure an equitable utilization. For that, we need to first consult with our states, West Bengal and Bihar. To promote the cultural ties, we can hold further annual joint events, for example, Tagore Nazrul Literary Festival. The Indian Council for Cultural Relations can be expanded beyond Dhaka, and we can also ensure that Bangladesh protects the minorities, the religious minorities in India, and take this issue up with the current regime of Bangladesh. There is a mains practice question as well. Discuss the significance of India-Bangladesh relations. What are the major challenges affecting the partnership? Suggest measures to strengthen the cooperation between the two countries. Please try to write it. The next article is related to free and fair elections. This is important in prelims under the topic Indian polity and governance, the constitution and political system. The context behind it is that earlier there were allegations related to electoral roll manipulation and duplicate epic numbers. That was the allegation in the Maharashtra elections as well. Now the TMC has filed a plea in the Supreme Court challenging the decision of the Election Commission to deploy the central government employees or the PSU employees as the counting supervisors in the West Bengal elections. Also, there have been allegations related to EVM tampering as well in the past. So what is the legal framework for ensuring free and fair elections in India? Under Article 324, the Election Commission has the plenary powers. It has the power for the superintendence, direction and control for ensuring free and fair elections in India, for the preparation of electoral rolls as well, and for the electoral roll preparation specifically under the Representation of Peoples Act 1950, and under the registration of electorals rules 1960, the rules for voter registration are framed. When we observe the voting process as well, it has evolved. For example, in 1952 and 1957, separate ballot boxes were provided for each candidate. The voters dropped blank ballots into the preferred candidate's box. In 1962, the ballot papers were provided with candidates' names and symbols. From 2004 onwards, the EVMs are provided in all the Lok Sabha constituencies. And 2019 onwards, 100% VVPAT, the voter verifiable paper audit trail slips were also provided. Now, what are the issues in the electoral process? First, the issues related to the EVMs and the VVPAT. There was a PIL which was filed which demanded the paper ballots. It was dismissed by the court. Then there was a demand for 100% VVPAT EVM matching. This was also rejected. As the current practice is, 5 machines per assembly segment are matched with the VVPAT to ensure that there are no mismatches, no lacunas in the EVM calculation. And the Supreme Court allowed for verification of 5% EVM microcontroller memory also in case of suspicions of tampering. Regarding the electoral roll manipulation, there have been allegations of bogus voters, fake voters in Maharashtra and Delhi elections, and the duplicate epic numbers in West Bengal, Gujarat, Haryana and Punjab. Now there are issues related to the campaign process as well. For example, the star campaigners, they have used the abusive language in the past. They have resorted to caste-based politics, communal-based politics to garner the votes in the elections, and even going for unverified allegations against the other campaigners. And there have been issues related to the election expenditure also. For example, the candidate election expenditure limits have been frequently breached. Also, there are no limits on the party spending, the cumulative one, and it was observed that in 2024 Lok Sabha elections, it was to the tune of 1 lakh crore rupees as election expenditure. Additionally, there is the issue of criminalization of politics. For example, 46% of the MPs elected after the 2024 elections, they face criminal charges, and 31% face serious charges, including that of rape and murder. Now, what are the significant electoral reforms that have already been taken up in India? To ensure transparency, we came up with the electoral bonds to reduce the cash donations to the political parties. Then we made the declaration of the income sources of the candidates mandatory, especially after the Lok Prahari case, the judgment given by the court. And then to increase the voter participation, we reduced the voting age to 18 years. We introduced the postal ballots and also the Election Laws Amendment Bill 2021. Then to introduce technology in voting, we introduced the EVMs, the voter verified paper audit trail, and also the none of the above option. To uphold the faith of the electorate in the election process, we came up with the anti-defection law to ensure that the legislators, they are not going for party hopping once they are elected, so that if they change the parties after the election, then they will be disqualified under the anti-defection law. And we wanted to prosecute the politicians, therefore we set up the special courts, we expedited the trials of the charges against the politicians. Also, to create a level playing field, the Model Code of Conduct is enforced by the Election Commission, whereby restrictions are imposed upon new announcements by the incumbent government, so that they are not able to influence the voters by announcing new grants, new schemes, etc. And even if there is a violation of the Model Code of Conduct, then it can be reported by using the C-Vigil app. Additionally, guidelines were given regarding the exit polls publishing, and if the exit polls are published midway, they can significantly influence the election outcomes. Therefore, they can be published only after the end of the elections. Also, the ceiling was placed on the election expenditure as well. Now, what are the suggestions that we can give regarding the conducting of free and fair elections? Specifically for the EVMs and VVPAT, we can increase the sample size for the matching of the EVM and the VVPAT results scientifically. We can also use the totalizer machines to aggregate the votes from 14 EVMs before counting. We can also use the Supreme Court directive to verify 5% EVMs in case of tampering suspicions. Additionally, for the cleanup of the electoral rolls, we can link the Aadhaar with the EPIC cards after addressing the privacy related concerns. Also, we can remove the duplicate EPIC numbers and ensure unique voter IDs. Regarding the campaign process specifically, we can suggest regarding the star campaigners that the Election Commission can revoke the star campaigner status for serious violations of Model Code of Conduct. If there is a serious violation of the Model Code of Conduct by the star campaigner himself, then his star campaigner status can be revoked. And we can use the paragraph 16A of the symbols order to suspend or withdraw the recognition of the parties if they are violating the Model Code of Conduct. Regarding the election expenditure, we can amend the laws to include the party financial assistance also within the expenditure incurred by the candidate. Also, we can introduce a ceiling on the political party expenditure as well. Regarding the criminalization of politics, we can suggest the strict enforcement of the Supreme Court directive for the candidates and parties to declare the candidates' criminal antecedents 3 times before the election so that the voters' right to know the antecedents of their chosen representative is not violated. The next article is related to China-US relations and the statement of China that Taiwan can be the biggest risk in the China-US relations. This is important in prelims under the topic Current Events of National and International Importance. Before coming to the article, let's discuss a brief background of Taiwan. Taiwan before the 1895 was under the Qing dynasty. In 1895 it was ceded to Japan, and after the World War II in 1945 it was returned to China. But in 1949 the Chinese Civil War ended and the nationalists in China who formed Kuomintang, they fled to Taiwan. And China has always regarded Taiwan as a renegade province that must be reunited with the mainland China, even if by force if necessary. And whereas Taiwan has meanwhile set up its own democratic system, a constitution and armed forces, and it seeks the international recognition. Now, what are the concerns of China with respect to Taiwan? Earlier there were concerns of China that the president of Taiwan, earlier Tsai Ing-wen, could go for the formal declaration of independence of Taiwan. And this is a red line in the mind of China, that China regards Taiwan as its own province and it is a renegade province that must be reunited. And because of the growing ties between Taiwan and United States, again China was concerned because Taiwan has a role in the first island chain and Taiwan is a hub of the manufacturing of the semiconductor chips which will be utilized for the artificial intelligence era. Now, what has been the role of USA with respect to Taiwan? Earlier, USA had supported the nationalist government of Taiwan in 1949. But after 1979, it switched the diplomatic recognition to the People's Republic of China rather than Taiwan. But simultaneously, it enacted the Taiwan Relations Act, through which it gives it the military and diplomatic support as well. Although it retains the policy of strategic ambiguity, but it gives the military and diplomatic support, for example, conducting of frequent naval and air patrols near Taiwan. And it considers it as a democratic partner and a counterweight to China's influence in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, what is India's interest with respect to Taiwan? We have trade ties with them. For example, we are dependent upon the South China Sea for trade in the Indo-Pacific. Therefore, we both have common security concerns, that is increasing assertiveness, increasing aggression of China in the South China Sea region. Also, we share common values. For example, democratic values, the values of freedom, human rights and rule of law. We need cooperation from Taiwan with respect to technology, for example, for the digital transformation of India, for fostering the growth of startup ecosystem in India further. And we have cultural ties also, for example, tourism, education and people-to-people contacts as well. So what has been India's stand with respect to Taiwan? We have maintained diplomatic relations with Taiwan since 1995. And therefore, we have business ties, tourism-related ties and consular ties, and we promote the peaceful resolution of the cross-state issues, the issues between China and Taiwan through dialogue, and that is in line with our constitutional article 51 as well, which promotes the resolution of international disputes by dialogue, by mediation peacefully. Now, coming to the article, the government of Taiwan has expressed a concern regarding a call between the top diplomats of China and USA. As in this call, Beijing stressed that the self-ruled Taiwan is the biggest risk in the China-US relations. And the press release issued by China is concerning as it unilaterally makes threatening remarks on the Taiwan issue. The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi urged the United States to make the right choices on Taiwan to safeguard the stability between the two nations, that is China and US. And this call comes ahead of a highly anticipated summit between the US President Trump and the Chinese leader Xi Jinping, because China sees the self-ruled Taiwan as its own breakaway province. The next article is related to the decline of rupee and is the rupee back to the fragile 5 days of 2013. This is important in prelims under the topic economic and social development. This concept of fragile five economies was propagated by Morgan Stanley, which observed in 2013 that there are five currencies which are fragile. They are in the emerging markets and the Indian rupee is one of them. This was treated in 2013. The other four currencies which were also treated as one among the fragile five included the Indonesian rupiah, which fell by more than 15% against the US dollar in 2013, the Brazilian real, which fell by more than 7%, the South African rand, which again fell by more than 14% against the US dollar, and the Turkish lira, which fell by more than 9% against the US dollar. Now, what is the reason behind the decline? One of the reasons was the quantitative easing. Now, what is quantitative easing? This was done by the central bank of the USA. When the central bank prints the money, then the borrowing becomes cheap. The borrowing can be done at near zero interest rates. Therefore, the investors borrow the US dollars at near zero interest rates, and the money that they borrow, they invest it in the high growth, high return economies, the developing markets, the emerging economies. But then there was the rollback of the quantitative easing, as the US Fed signaled that it will roll back the quantitative easing. Therefore, it will lead to the rise in the interest rates of USA. Therefore, the investors will pull back their money from the emerging markets, because now they want to invest in the US bonds. The US bonds, they are one of the most risk-free investments, and therefore they are loaning directly to the US government, because there itself the interest rate is rising. Now, what is the reason of the value loss of the currencies? Because one of the factors was the US Fed signal that it will roll back the quantitative easing. Plus, apart from that, there was already the current account deficit. The emerging economies, they were able to sustain the current account deficit because of the capital account surplus, because there was more money coming in through the foreign direct investment in search of higher returns, because of the higher growth in the developing economies, and because of the money from the FDI and the stock market investments, there was capital account surplus. Therefore, the current account deficit that could be sustained. But if the quantitative easing was rolled back, it was reversed, the investment flows, they were also reversed. Therefore, the relative demand of these currencies against the dollar also crashed. Therefore, it also crashed the currencies, the fragile five currencies, they also crashed against the dollar, because the exchange rate that is driven by the relative demand of the two currencies, for example, rupee versus dollar. Now, what is the similarity in 2026 to the fragile five situation of 2013? First, there is a claim by the government that our economy has grown from the fragile five status of 2013 to the top five economies by GDP size, although now recently the Indian economy has slid to the sixth position now. And the Indian rupee has suffered the second worst fall, the fall of 12%. There are two currencies which has actually appreciated against the US dollar now. For example, Brazil up to 12%, South Africa up to 10%. Whereas the Turkish lira, that has been losing significantly. We can see that it has lost more than 1000% since May 2018 due to the other geopolitical factors as well. Now, when we compare the slide of 2026 with the slide of 2013, there are a few distinct factors. Rupee hit an all-time low of more than 95 recently, and in April 2025, just a year ago, it was trading at less than 85 against the dollar, so there has been a significant decline. There has been a fall of more than 12% in the 12 months. Normal yearly slide is around only just 3 to 4%. But there is a difference in the sequence. For example, in fiscal year 14 also there was a fall in the rupee, but that was after the sharp falls in the previous 2 years also. There was a fall in fiscal year 13 by 6%, fall in fiscal year 12 by 13%, but this time the fall in the last fiscal has not been as significant. What are the factors behind the recent slide? It has been similar to the balance of payment calculus. The net effect of the current account and the capital account, for example, we can see that in the 2013 region also, both the current account and the capital account, they were in the negative, and the same effect can be observed in the end of 2025 as well. The September 2013 quarter and the December 2025 quarter, both deficits are present, capital account as well as current account. Now what is the implication of both the deficits? Now we will have to spend more US dollars on the imports, because there are essential imports that keep on happening. For example, the energy imports, the oil and natural gas imports, and there is a flight of the dollar on a net basis, because there is a withdrawal of the investments from India by the foreign institutional investors also from the stock market, for example. And now what is the path to pay for both the deficits? We have to withdraw from the foreign exchange reserves, which is a cause of concern. The next article is related to anticipatory bail. This is important in prelims under the topic Indian polity and governance. Let us observe the legislative provision related to anticipatory bail. The section 438 provides that if any person has any reason to believe that he may be arrested on the accusation of having committed a non-bailable offence, then he may approach directly to the High Court or to the Court of Session as well for a direction under this section that in the event of such arrest he shall be released on bail. And the court can issue such anticipatory bail as well. Even before the arrest, the anticipatory bail can be given, depending upon the nature and gravity of the accusation, depending upon the antecedents of the applicant. For example, whether he has previously undergone imprisonment. If he has never gone to jail, then he can be given anticipatory bail. And whether there is a possibility of the applicant to flee from justice, whether he can just flee from India, and whether the accusation has been made with the object of injuring or humiliating the applicant by having him arrested, etc., then the anticipatory bail can also be granted even before the arrest. Before coming to the article, let us also observe certain judicial observations regarding the granting of anticipatory bail. In the Gurbakh Singh Sibia versus the State of Punjab case, the court held that there must be reason to believe that a person may be arrested, for example, filing of an FIR, and a reason to believe that he will be arrested. Otherwise, there won't be any granting of the anticipatory bail, as there will be no blanket anticipatory bail. Also, conditions can be imposed as per the situation and as per the seriousness of the situation. In the state of Madhya Pradesh versus Ramkrishna Balotia, the court held that anticipatory bail is not a fundamental right. It can be denied based upon the situation, the circumstances of that case. In Sushila Agarwal versus the state NCT of Delhi, the court held that it is not strictly bound by time. The lower courts, they can also limit the validity depending upon the circumstances of the case. In the MC Abraham versus the state of Maharashtra, the court held that even if the anticipatory bail application is rejected, it does not amount to a necessary arrest. That it does not mean he has to be necessarily arrested if merely the anticipatory bail application has been rejected. In Bhadresh Bipin Bhai Sheth versus the state of Gujarat case, the court held that the rejection has to be done with proper justification. Rejection of the anticipatory bail application, if there is no proper justification, that it amounts to the violation of the Article 21. In state of Maharashtra versus Vishwas case, the court held that it can also be recalled. The anticipatory bail, if it is provided, it can also be cancelled, and it is only a special privilege. It cannot be misused, therefore. Now coming to the article, the Supreme Court has granted the Congress leader Pawan Khera anticipatory bail in a criminal case instituted on the complaint of the wife of the Assam Chief Minister, saying the case appears to be motivated by the political rivalry and it does not warrant custodial interrogation. As the court held that the criminal process must be applied with objectivity and circumspection so as to ensure that the individual liberty is not imperiled by the proceedings that may be colored by the political rivalry. Therefore, the allegations and counter-allegations prima facie here appear to be politically motivated and seemingly influenced by such rivalry. Therefore, the person should not be put under arrest. The next article is related to National Human Rights Commission. This is important in prelims under the topic Indian Polity and Governance. The NHRC protects and promotes the human rights in India. It is a statutory body established under the Human Rights Act 1993 and it is in conformity with the Paris Principles of 1991. It comprises of a chairperson who can be an ex-Chief Justice of India or a Supreme Court judge, and the 5 members, one is a Supreme Court judge and one is a Chief Justice of a High Court, and the other 3 members, they are having knowledge of human rights or practical experience in the matters involving human rights, and at least 1 member has to be a woman. There is an appointment committee which appoints the members of the National Human Rights Commission. The appointment committee comprises of the Prime Minister, the Speaker of Lok Sabha, the Union Minister of Home Affairs, the 2 leaders of opposition, that is in both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and the Deputy Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. The term of functioning is 3 years or up to the age of 70 years, and the removal happens by the President. The removal can happen after the inquiry by the Supreme Court if there is a proved misbehavior or incapacity. The other grounds are if the member becomes insolvent or he engages in paid employment outside the duties, or he is infirm of mind or body, or he is proven to be having unsound mind so declared by a competent court, or he is convicted or sentenced for an offence involving moral turpitude. Thank you.